My name is Shelley Mitchell, and I was 30 years old when I finally realized with bitter, crystalline clarity that some people would never see me, not the real me. I was an interior designer, successful by all accounts. My projects were published in glossy magazines, and clients lined up. But professional success, loud and visible, proved powerless to mend that bottomless, cold hole that had been gaping inside me since childhood. Before we continue, I'm very curious. What country are you from, dear listeners? Write in the comments where you're listening from. And now we continue. I had parents and a younger sister, Madison. And as far back as my memory reaches, Madison was always and unconditionally the favorite. It wasn't that subtle, almost elusive preference. No, it was a brazen, demonstrative axiom of our family life. When I was 7 and Madison was 5, I took second place in the school art contest. I brought my blue ribbon home, bursting with impatience to show it to my mom and dad. But that very day, Madison learned to tie her shoelaces. And guess which of the two sisters was celebrated at dinner? Mom made Madison's favorite strawberry cake, and Dad took delight in photographing her little feet in new, neatly laced shoes. My ribbon, however, disappeared without a trace in some bag or under a pile of newspapers. I never found it. When I turned 10, I made the honor roll. Madison got a shiny trophy just for participating in a soccer tournament. She couldn't even kick the ball properly, but Dad placed that trinket on the mantelpiece, as if it were an Olympic gold medal. My report card hung on the refrigerator for maybe 2 days before it vanished without a trace, under the bright but chaotic pile of Madison's art projects. Every birthday, every Christmas, the picture was painfully familiar. Madison received more valuable gifts, more attention, universal admiration. If I timidly complained, I was immediately accused of selfishness. If I stayed silent, withdrawing into myself, I was simply forgotten. By the age of 12, I stopped trying to compete in this predetermined losing race. I found my refuge in an old, semi-abandoned garage behind our house. It smelled of dust, dry cedar, and motor oil, the sense of freedom and peace. No one bothered me there. I could sit for hours on the cold concrete floor, sanding old, unwanted boards until my fingers went numb and my shoulders burned with fire. It was the only place I truly felt was mine. And one summer day, I decided to build something, a simple table. I had no clear plan or experience, just a handful of wood scraps and a few basic tools found in a corner of the garage. The legs came out crooked, the edges uneven, but when I finished and stepped back to assess my work, the table stood, clumsy but sturdy, real. It was the first thing in my life for which the credit could not be taken from me or appropriated by anyone else. Not Mom, not Dad, not Madison, only me. From then on, that table became my talisman. When I went to college on a scholarship, I took it with me. Mom asked with bewilderment why I was dragging that old, shabby thing when they could buy me a new modern desk. I didn't explain. I just loaded it into the trunk of my old car and set off on the 3-hour drive to campus. In the dorm, I dragged that table up to the 3rd floor by myself. My roommate looked at me as if I were crazy, but I refinished it again, sanded every dent, and coated the top with a new layer of varnish. It became my desk, then a drawing surface, and then the first place for prototyping all my future projects. It was in college, sitting at that homemade table, that I understood with unwavering certainty that I was capable of something truly worthwhile. Interior design revealed itself to me as something self-evident, clear, and undeniable. I learned to see spaces not as they were, but as they were meant to become. I gained the power to correct mistakes, to make things better, more harmonious, more right. After graduating from university, I started my own business. At first, things moved slowly. Projects were small and infrequent, but I worked with a fanatical tenacity that outshone everyone around me. I took on work that more established colleagues refused. I stayed up nights, checking every centimeter, every shade, and eventually, my persistence was noticed. By 30, I had built something tangible and solid, a successful design firm that attracted clients who valued my vision and sought to work specifically with me. Financial independence allowed me to fulfill a dream I had nurtured for years in secret from everyone. I bought a plot of land in the Hamptons, right on the Atlantic Ocean shore, and designed a villa from the foundation to the roof ridge. Construction consumed 2 years of my life. I spent almost every day on site, watching as the walls rose brick by brick, making countless adjustments, and vigilantly ensuring the flawless execution of every detail. My old, weathered table stood in the construction trailer all that time, serving as a reliable headquarters, littered with scrolls of blueprints and stained with coffee cup rings. A few months before the final finishes, a television crew approached me. After some brief consideration, I accepted their offer to rent the villa for a TV show and present it as a completed project. The final shoot was scheduled for the end of summer. I, however, had planned a housewarming, a celebratory dinner with a large circle. Electronic invitations with the date were sent out to my parents and Madison. I told them in detail about the house, about the upcoming celebration, about everything I had managed to create with my own hands. I desperately wanted them to see it firsthand. Perhaps, somewhere deep down, that same naive girl was still smoldering, still craving their approval and pride. On Thursday, 2 days before the scheduled celebration, I was at the villa, checking the final details, when my phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from Mom, short, like a blow. "We are not coming to your housewarming. Your sister is also moving into a rental apartment." I reread those lines 3 times, absorbing their impersonal cruelty. Not a shadow of regret, not a hint of explanation, just a cold, incontrovertible verdict. Madison was moving into a rental apartment, and her needs were once again prioritized over my celebration. I typed 2 words in response: "It's fine." Then I put the phone aside and slowly looked around the dining table I had designed. 16 identical chairs, placed with geometric precision at equal distances from each other. I had built this table specifically for that party, for those people I naively thought I would see sitting here. Anger didn't come. Instead, a strange, almost icy clarity washed over me, as if I had just awoken from a long sleep, as if my entire previous life had been spent in futile expectation of their arrival, and only now, with merciless obviousness, did I realize they weren't coming. Ever. I turned off the phone and put it in a desk drawer. Then I took my notepad and started making a completely different list. Not a list of those who were supposed to come, but a list of those who were always forgotten. In every large family, I realized, there are such invisible people, pushed to the sidelines of collective attention. I myself had been pushed away, ignored, and now I began to write down their names. The list filled with frightening, rapid ease. Jacob, my cousin, smart and ironic, who always had a kind word for me at family gatherings. He wasn't invited to the last Christmas gathering because he was going through a difficult divorce, and Mom thought it would be awkward. Aunt Barbara, my father's sister, who was always struggling financially. At Thanksgiving, she was seated to eat in the kitchen, citing a lack of space at the big table, even though there was always miraculously room for Madison's casual friends. Grandma on my mother's side, who had once been explicitly told that she talked too much at dinner, after which she started staying home in proud solitude. Jennifer, another cousin, raising kids alone and working 2 jobs, about whom no one ever asked, "How are you?" By the time I put the final period, I had a list of 12 names in front of me, 12 people who deserved a place at the table where they would finally be seen and their significance acknowledged. The next morning, I opened my laptop and typed a short but substantial message. "This Saturday at my place in the Hamptons. A simple dinner, come hungry," and I sent it, along with my address, to everyone whose name was on that salvific list. Then I plunged headlong into preparations. My first call was to a trusted catering company, known for its scrupulous attention to quality, not cost-cutting. I ordered everything imaginable for a perfect reception. Exquisite appetizers, several main course options, elegant desserts. No half measures. Nothing that could make a guest feel like they were at a secondary, budget party. This was to be a feast worthy of their presence. Next came the tableware. I ordered real porcelain, heavy and resonant, not impersonal disposable plates. I wanted to achieve impeccable harmony. Identical plates, perfectly aligned glasses, cutlery polished to a shine. Not a single mismatched item, not the slightest chipped edge. No one should ever feel like an unwanted guest at my table. I spent the entire day handwriting place cards in calligraphic script, one for each setting. A simple but profound message on each. Your place is here. I used thick, noble cardstock, and my hand inscribed each letter with ink as black as night. 16 cards in total, one for each chair awaiting its guest. Friday evening came swiftly. I was at the villa, finishing the last checks, when the film crew unexpectedly showed up. They had arrived ahead of schedule, but I had agreed to these shoots months ago. The producer, an energetic woman named Sarah, explained that they needed to capture the interiors in perfect, pristine cleanliness before life began to stir in the house. "No problem," I replied. "Do what you must." They began setting up cameras and arranging lights, while I continued my work. I tightened loose screws on the chairs, adjusted decorative pillows, wiped clean the already gleaming stone countertop in the kitchen. They filmed me, asking questions about the design choices, about why the house was built this way. "I wanted to create a space where everyone could sit at one table," I said, almost without thinking, just speaking my innermost truth aloud. Sarah asked me to elaborate, and I told her about the table, about the equal distances between the chairs, about the absence of a designated head of the family seat. She nodded, as if catching the unspoken thing hidden behind my words. The filming dragged on well past midnight. When the crew finally packed up their equipment, Sarah thanked me and said the episode would air the following week. I barely registered her words. All my thoughts were already there, in the coming Saturday, in the guests who were supposed to come, in the tormenting question, had I done enough? And then Saturday evening arrived. As the sun began to dip toward the water, staining the horizon crimson, I lit candles, placing them along the table and on side tables throughout the house, creating a warm, intimate atmosphere. Then I stood by the panoramic window and waited, motionless. The first car pulled up around 6. Through the glass, I saw the silhouettes of people getting out. Jennifer's children rushed to the door, their voices ringing and filled with excitement, cutting through the evening quiet. Jennifer herself followed, nervously smoothing her dress and clutching a modest bag. Then Aunt Barbara's car arrived. She got out slowly, carefully carrying a pie wrapped in a simple kitchen towel. She had baked something herself. I felt my throat tighten with sudden emotion. More cars came. Jacob arrived with his teenage daughter. Grandma appeared in a modest but neat dress, looking around with slight uncertainty, as if not quite believing she was in the right place. 2 other cousins I hadn't seen for years arrived. An uncle, who always sat alone at family gatherings. When the last invited guest crossed the threshold, I closed the door behind him and took a deep, meaningful breath. Everyone I had invited had indeed come. They were enchanted by the house. I could see it on their faces, in the way they looked around. Aunt Barbara cautiously touched a plastered wall, as if checking its reality. Jacob walked to the window and stood still, gazing at the vast, twilight-shrouded ocean. Jennifer's children raced from room to room, their happy shouts and footsteps echoing loudly off the polished to a mirror-shine floors. They followed on my heels, moving from one room to another. I led them through the kitchen with its massive marble island, the living room with its floor-to-ceiling panoramic windows, the bedrooms upstairs with their breathtaking views of the night ocean. Grandma kept saying that it was all beautiful, just indescribably beautiful. And in her eyes, accustomed to emotional frugality, there was genuine tenderness. Aunt Barbara had tears welling up, which she wiped away with the corner of her handkerchief, furtively, as if embarrassed by her sincerity. When the tour ended, I led them into the dining room. They found their places without fuss, and the silence filled with the rustle of cards as they picked them up and read them. Some smiled, confused and touched. Others froze with expressions, as if they were about to burst into tears from the overwhelming feelings. We all sat down together. The food was served sequentially, one course after another, like in a good restaurant. No one had to humbly serve themselves in the kitchen, away from the general merriment. No one ate alone. We all sat at one large table, on identical chairs, with identical tableware in front of us. There were no loud, pompous toasts or obligatory ceremonial speeches. No one made remarks to Grandma when she, getting excited, started telling her stories, raising her voice. No one allowed themselves a single comment about Aunt Barbara's modest dress, Jacob's painful divorce, or how exhaustively hard things were for Jennifer. We simply ate, talked, and laughed, and the laughter was natural and light. At one point, Jennifer leaned toward me, and her whisper was full of the bitterness that had accumulated over the years. "I'm never seated at the main table at family dinners." "There is no main table here," I replied quietly, and that was the essence of my design. The evening stretched on, filled with effortless conversation. The children played in the living room, and the adults, serene, finished their coffee and enjoyed dessert. Grandma told a long, winding story from her childhood, which probably no one would have listened to at another, more formal party. But here, they listened for real, taking in every word. After 9, the guests finally began to leave. I was left alone in the empty dining room. The candles were burning down, melting into bizarre wax strips. A mountain of unwashed dishes rose in the kitchen, but, contrary to the silence, the house felt more alive than ever, as if it had finally found its true purpose, filled with the warmth of human voices and laughter. The episode aired the following week. I hadn't planned to watch it, had even forgotten about its premiere, until that evening when cars started pulling up to my house again. Jennifer, Jacob, Aunt Barbara, even Grandma. They returned, bringing snacks and drinks, saying they wanted to watch the show together, as one big family. We set up a projector on the terrace and aimed it at a white sheet stretched between 2 poles. The show began. Footage of the villa floated across the screen. Magnificent aerial views of the ocean, close-ups of design details. The calm, professional voice of the narrator sounded from the speakers. When designer Shelley Mitchell built her villa on the ocean shore, she wanted to create a space where everyone could sit at one table. Then my own recorded voice came on, from months ago. I had already forgotten I'd said these words. Justice is not a decoration, it is a structure. The episode showed the house, showed the table, showed everything I had built with my own hands. When the credits rolled, everyone gathered on the terrace burst into applause. Grandma was beaming. Aunt Barbara looked at the screen with undisguised pride. And at that very moment, my phone, lying on my lap, began to vibrate. Once, then again, and then it didn't stop. The screen kept flashing with new notifications. Mom, Dad, Madison. I let it ring, again and again. I didn't touch it, just watched as the missed calls accumulated on the screen. Jennifer noticed. She leaned over and asked quietly, "Are you going to answer?" "No," I replied just as quietly. "Not now." By morning, I had 37 missed calls. Then the messages came. "We saw the show. Why didn't you tell us anything? Everyone is talking about it. You've embarrassed us." And finally, "Call me back." I didn't call back. Instead, I opened my old notepad and found that list. Looked at the last item. Then I drew a straight line through it and wrote a single word next to it. Done. The next day, around noon, I heard a restrained knock on the door. Grandma stood on the doorstep, having come without calling first, and her face held an expression that said this visit was not accidental. "May I come in?" she asked, and her voice held an uncharacteristic seriousness. I nodded, leading her to the living room where the ocean stretched out serenely beyond the panoramic windows. We sat opposite each other, steam rising in a thin stream from freshly brewed tea. Grandma held the porcelain cup carefully, as if gathering her thoughts before breaking the silence. "Your parents are telling everyone you didn't invite them," she finally said, looking at me across the table. "They're creating the impression that you deliberately excluded them." I laughed, not bitterly, but with relief, because the truth was on my side. I invited them. They chose not to come. "I know," Grandma replied softly, "and everyone who cares knows it too. But they are upset about the show. They don't like how it looked." I slowly set my cup down on the saucer. It looked exactly as it was. They weren't there because they chose Madison again. Grandma nodded, and understanding was in her eyes. "I just wanted to warn you. They are working themselves up more and more." "I'm not going to justify myself," I said firmly. "Everyone who matters to me knows the truth. That's enough." The corners of Grandma's lips touched a smile, and she patted my hand. "Good. That's what I wanted to hear." At that moment, my phone rang. The screen showed Mom. I looked at it for a few seconds, then pressed the answer button and put the call on speakerphone. "Shelley," my mother's voice was artificially soft, almost saccharine. "We saw that show. There's been a huge misunderstanding." I remained silent, letting her speak. "The show gave the impression that we excluded you, but that's not the case at all. That weekend Madison was moving. We couldn't not help her. You understand, right?" "I saved your message," I replied calmly. "The one where you wrote you weren't coming. I can show it to anyone." The softness in her voice vanished instantly, replaced by irritation. "You're exaggerating everything again. We always supported you. We just didn't think you'd make such a show out of your housewarming. You were always so secretive." Before I could answer, Grandma intervened. Her voice sounded firm and authoritative. "Stop it, Linda. Enough." There was silence on the other end. And when Mom spoke again, her tone was strained. "Mom, I've watched you since Shelley was a child," Grandma continued. "You always turned away from her, always chose Madison. Every Christmas, every birthday you built the whole house around Madison's comfort. You know it, and I know it." "That's not true," Mom's voice trembled. "It is true," Grandma said quietly, but inexorably. "And now the whole town has seen it." The call cut off. Mom hung up without another word. Grandma looked at me, and her gaze held approval. "You did everything right," she said. A few days passed. I had started to think that was the end of it. But one morning, I heard the sound of an engine on the driveway. Through the window, I saw a familiar SUV. All three of them got out: Mom, Dad, and Madison. They slowly approached the house, their glances sliding over the landscape, the windows, the ocean view. Madison, looking at the villa, said loudly enough for me to make out the words through the closed door. "I've always dreamed of a house like this." I swung the door open. All three turned to me, and their eyes held a mixture of admiration and awkwardness. "What do you want?" I asked, not stepping forward. Mom tried to smile, but it was strained, fake, the one that appeared on her face when she wanted something. "We need to talk, dear," Mom began, still pretending to smile. "To explain this misunderstanding, to sort things out, finally." Dad stepped forward, his gaze firm and demanding. "You should throw another housewarming party, just for us, and then post pictures on social media showing our reconciliation. It would help restore our reputation in the eyes of the community." I laughed, bitterly and without a trace of amusement. "You want me to throw a party for you? After you refused to come because you had to help Madison move into a rental apartment?" "You always dramatize everything," Madison said with mild irritation. Her gaze slid past me, into the depths of the house, searching for every interior detail. "Actually, I thought I could stay here for a while. You have so much space. It would help us reunite as a family." Without a word, I took out my phone and opened the keypad. "If you don't leave my property within 1 minute, I will call the police." "You wouldn't dare." Dad's voice was loud and threatening. I started dialing the numbers. 9, 1. "This is insane." Madison's voice became high-pitched. "Are you really going to call the police on your own family?" 1. Mom grabbed Dad's arm. "Let's go. She's being unreasonable." They slowly headed back to the car. Dad kept turning around, throwing heavy, indignant looks at me. Madison was muttering something to herself, gesturing irritably. Mom's face was twisted in a mask of cold anger. When they reached the car, Dad shouted over his shoulder, "You'll regret this. You can't just cut us out of your life like this." "We'll see," I said quietly but clearly, and closed the door. Through the window, I watched them drive away. Madison was gesturing animatedly in the back seat. Mom sat motionless, staring straight ahead, and Dad drove with his jaw clenched. As soon as they were out of sight, I dialed Jennifer's number and told her everything that had happened. She laughed so hard she almost dropped the phone. "They wanted you to throw a party for them?" she exclaimed when she could speak again. "And Madison wanted to move in? Of course she did. This house is incredible." Then her voice became more serious. "Are you okay? Really?" "Yes," I replied. "Really." And it was the pure truth. For the first time in my life, I had drawn a clear, unambiguous boundary and was ready to defend it. They remained on one side, I on the other, and I was perfectly fine with that. Months passed. I didn't hear from my parents or Madison, nor did I seek contact. That silence was peaceful, almost healing. At the same time, I kept in touch with everyone who had come to that dinner. Jacob and I started having lunch together regularly, once a month. Aunt Barbara called every week just to chat. Jennifer brought her kids over to swim in the ocean. Grandma visited whenever she wanted, sometimes staying for a few days. We gathered often, not lavish receptions, but simple dinners, barbecues on the terrace, informal gatherings by the fireplace. The villa became a place where people felt welcome and valued, where they didn't have to worry about judgment or rejection. My design business continued to grow. The TV broadcast attracted new affluent clients and larger-scale projects. I hired 2 assistants and began work on a commercial building downtown. And that old garage table, with its uneven legs and rough surface, still stood in my home office. I used it every day. It reminded me of where I started and what I had managed to build with my own hands. I was 30 years old, successful, and, finally, surrounded by people who genuinely wanted to be near me, my real family, the one I had chosen myself. Life took on a steady, deep rhythm, filled with genuine meaning and peace. Every morning I woke up in the villa to the monotonous, lulling rumble of the ocean's surf. I immersed myself in work on complex, fascinating design projects that challenged me and revealed my potential. And I spent my evenings in the company of people whose care and interest in me were sincere and unconditional. It was all simple, clear, and incredibly real. Our dinners became a pleasant tradition, gathering the company once a month, sometimes more often. I never planned them too meticulously, just sent a message asking who wanted to come. Usually, the answer was a unanimous everyone. Each time, Jacob showed up at the doorstep with his 15-year-old daughter. The girl, who dreamed of becoming an architect, absorbed my every word with burning eyes. We could discuss design principles and architectural forms for hours, while she diligently jotted down ideas in her notebook. She was my reflection at that age, when the thirst to create something meaningful burns brightly in the heart. Aunt Barbara moved beyond just pies. Now she proudly brought real culinary masterpieces, enthusiastically experimenting with recipes found online. Once she admitted that at previous family celebrations, she was never allowed to cook. "At your table," she said, her voice trembling, "I can bring anything I want, and people will be happy to eat it." Jennifer's children felt at home at the villa. They knew exactly where the beach towels were, which bathroom to use, and how to use the outdoor shower. Jennifer herself showered me with thanks until I finally asked her to stop. "This is what a real family should look like," I said, and she smiled and nodded. Grandma visited me at least twice a week, sometimes staying overnight in one of the guest rooms. In the evenings, we sat on the terrace, watching the sun sink into the ocean, and she told stories from her long life, stories no one had bothered to listen to before. My design business flourished after that television episode. Calls came from all over the state. People wanted me to design their homes, offices, commercial spaces. I hired 2 assistants to handle the increased workload. We rented a small office in the city, but I still created the bulk of the projects at home, at my old garage table. One evening, about 8 months after the show aired, I was working late when my phone vibrated. An unknown number. I was about to ignore it, but some vague premonition made me put the receiver to my ear. "Shelley?" A voice I hadn't heard in many months. "Madison, what do you want?" "I just wanted to talk, see how you're doing." I remained silent, letting her continue. "Look, I know things got out of hand with that party, but we're family. We should be able to move past this." "You want to move into my house," I stated coldly, "after Mom and Dad refused to come to my housewarming because they were helping you with your rental apartment. Don't you see how that looks?" "I was just upset that day. I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did," I retorted. Silence fell on the line, and then her voice sounded quieter. "Mom and Dad miss you." "No, they don't miss me. They miss the ability to control me. That's a big difference." "That's not fair," she screeched. I stood up and walked to the window. The ocean was dark, the waves barely visible in the moonlight. "Madison, you were the favorite our entire lives. Your every achievement was celebrated. All my successes were ignored, unless they glorified you or made them, our parents, look good. And now that I've built something they can't take credit for, they want back in. But it wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, and you know it." She was silent for a long time. "And that's it? You're just cutting us out of your life? I'm tired of being treated as if I don't matter. If you don't understand why, that's your problem, not mine." I hung up before she could reply and blocked the number immediately. 2 weeks later, a letter lay in my mailbox, exuding a chill from the past. The envelope was covered in a cramped, familiar handwriting, Madison's, and I almost threw it in the trash without breaking its fragile seal. But a bitter, ineradicable curiosity overpowered prudence. Inside were 3 pages, filled with elaborate apologies and unconvincing excuses, where my sister finally acknowledged her role in the years-long drama and expressed a desire to make things right, mentioning that our parents were facing reputation problems in town, where people had gradually stopped inviting them to social events, making it unbearably hard for everyone. I read the message once, absorbing its essence, and then slowly, with almost ritual care, fed the sheets through the shredder in my office, watching as they turned into thin, meaningless paper strips, symbolically severing the last threads that might still have connected me to that painful past. The villa, bathed in the soft light of the sunset, had finally transformed into the very space I had always dreamed of creating. A place where every person crossing the threshold felt they belonged, where the previously forgotten and marginalized found their rightful place at the common table, and where the very architecture denied the very possibility of anyone's exclusive superiority. That year, I hosted Thanksgiving for the first time, and 23 people gathered within my walls. Jacob with his daughter, Jennifer with her noisy and cheerful family, Aunt Barbara, Grandma, cousins with whom I had managed to revive lost connections, and even a few friends from the design circle who had become an integral part of this new, chosen family of mine. We pushed the tables together into a single, long composition so no one would feel superfluous, and the children sat alongside the adults, their laughter merging with the general hum of conversation, and it didn't occur to anyone to separate them or send them to another room. Grandma said a prayer, her voice, touched by age but still firm, trembling with restrained emotion as she thanked the higher powers for a second chance, and for people who aren't afraid to build tables large enough for everyone. Aunt Barbara couldn't hold back tears, and Jacob, raising his glass, proposed a toast that expressed the general feeling. This is what a real family should feel like. I slowly looked around at those gathered, absorbing the atmosphere of genuine closeness, looking at the faces of people who had come not out of duty, but by the call of the heart. People who had been rejected by others, but had found their refuge and recognition here, under my roof. During dessert, as the table resounded with laughter and the clinking of spoons, the phone in my pocket vibrated weakly. I glanced at the screen. Mom. Without a shadow of a doubt, I dismissed the notification, not granting it even a moment's attention, and returned the phone to the depths of my pocket, symbolically fencing off the present from the ghosts of the past. Late in the evening, when the last guest had crossed the threshold and a blissful, saturated silence settled in the house, I wandered through the emptied rooms, turning off the lights. In the dining room, dishes remained on the huge table, silent witnesses to the recently concluded celebration. In the living room, Jennifer's children's toys lay scattered. On the terrace stood empty glasses and dessert plates. The whole house breathed coziness and life. It looked lived in, loved. It was a real home in the deepest sense of the word. I lingered by the window in my study, and my gaze fell on the old garage table with its crooked legs and rough edges, still standing firmly after all these years, a silent witness to my difficult coming of age. I had built it at 12, desperately trying to create something of my own, independent, and now, surveying my current life, I understood that I had built it on the same principle, step by step, on my own terms, assembling a whole from the fragments of the past. The phone vibrated again, insistently and annoyingly, probably someone from the old family trying to reach me again, but I didn't even bother to check, simply turned the device off completely, leaving it lying on the table like an artifact no longer needed. Outside, beyond the glass, the ocean in its eternal and measured rhythm washed onto the shore, its powerful roar the soundtrack to my newfound peace. Inside, everything was in its place, everything was as it should be. I was 30 years old, I had built a successful business, a beautiful home, and, most importantly, a family that truly reciprocated, not the one I was born into by chance, but the one I had consciously chosen, and which, in turn, had chosen me. And in that moment, standing in the silence of my home, I realized that I had never been so happy and so complete before. Someone might think I should forgive them, give them another chance, let them back into my life. But I had learned the most important lesson. You are not obligated to grant people access to your life based solely on shared DNA. Family is not a given, but an opportunity to express oneself. It is mutual care and giving a person a sense of their significance. My real family was here, within these walls filled with love and acceptance, and that was more than enough for a full, profound happiness.